Hey everyone, it's Coach Jess. So today's mobility video is actually inspired by one of my friends who reached out to me. He's been having some nagging problems with a proximal hamstring issue. A little bit about him: he's an ultra runner and is trying to get me to follow in suit and do some very long trail runs / hikes. So hopefully I will be able to join him soon. But in the meantime, this video is for all of you who are struggling with proximal, meaning closer to the core, hamstring issues. So we're going to talk about how to mobilize that area if you're dealing with a chronic issue, maybe some tendonitis or a nagging strain. This should help as well. So for today, we're going to be talking about 3 specific steps that I want you all to take. So first off, we're going to be dealing with soft tissue mobilization. So we really need to pay attention to our soft tissue health. And so for the proximal hamstring, the best tool that I've found is using a lacrosse ball. A foam roller isn't quite hard enough to actually give you the pressure that you need. You need something that's a little bit more pinpoint as opposed to a foam roller, which provides a lot of diffuse pressure. So I find that a lacrosse ball tends to work best, especially when you're trying to get into a very specific area and do some soft tissue work. Step 2 is going to be some stretching. So I have a stretching strap here to help us. I'm going to show you 3 different positions to do some stretching in for your hamstrings. And then third and final step is going to be activation and eccentric loading. So for those of you who are dealing with chronic tendonitis or maybe some inflammation or strain to the proximal hamstring, that step should help a lot. So first up, let's start with soft tissue mobilization. So for those of you who don't know, I actually used to be a competitive dancer way back in the day. Maybe a few years back, I was training to dance again. So we were doing some center leaps across the floor. And when I came down on this leg, I actually kind of jarred my lateral hamstring, the biceps femoris, and I got a really nasty strain that occurred, same thing, really high up on that proximal hamstring where it attaches onto the pelvis. So the best thing that I found to break up scar tissue and any other fascial adhesions that you might have is a lacrosse ball. So wherever you're feeling kind of that pulling or that tenderness, yes, hi Toby, this is my partner in crime, Toby. He wants to be very involved today, so you might see him making some appearances. All right, so you're gonna take your lacrosse ball and you're gonna put it directly where you find kind of that area of discomfort, okay? So you're gonna hang out there and you wanna make sure that the lacrosse ball is directly on top of that area of discomfort, or directly below in this case. So I'm kind of moving around and you can definitely feel it. It's gonna feel very tender when you're on the right spot. So one of the things that people do when they're doing soft tissue mobilization is that they don't spend long enough to actually get some of the benefits that they need. So the trick is, same thing with stretching, you need to hang out there long enough to actually notice some progress. So since Toby was blocking me before, okay, we have the lacrosse ball right underneath the leg, kind of high up under the hip. So I'm going on the lateral hamstring. You can go on the more medial side, so closer to the adductors. And then I'm just slowly applying as much pressure as I feel comfortable with. And then one thing that you can do is you can apply stretch as you're doing some of this soft tissue work. So what I like to do is place both hands forward so that I'm supporting myself. I'm just gonna rock forward a little bit so that I can feel a stretch through the hamstring muscles as I'm applying that pressure. Now, I want you to think of the area where you're noticing that tenderness as kind of like a target, okay? So to start, I'm putting the lacrosse ball right at the bullseye where there's the most pain discomfort, but that's not the only place I'm going to hit. So once I've noticed a little bit of progress there, I'm actually going to move the lacrosse ball just slightly off of that bullseye point, so just slightly off to the side, and then I'm going to start moving kind of in circles out and away to make sure that I'm getting all the surrounding tissue as well. So we're trying to break up any fascial adhesions that may have formed during the healing process. And then you can kind of internally, externally rotate the leg to help apply pressure to all of those different spots. Same thing, adding in a little bit of stretch, backing off of it. So you really want to try to make sure you're hitting that area in a pretty thorough manner. So that's going to take care of step 1, soft tissue mobilization. Now, a quick point about doing work with a lacrosse ball. So a lacrosse ball applies that pinpoint pressure, so you can actually do a little bit too much. It can actually cause some bruising to the skin. So I would say no more than every other day, give or take, for lacrosse ball work in the same location. The foam roller, it's meant to provide that diffuse pressure spread out over the foam roller. So foam rolling you can do about every day, but with lacrosse balls, golf balls, anything that's definitely more pinpoint, switch it to every other day. All right, next we're gonna move on to step 2. We're gonna talk about stretching for the hamstring muscle group. So you can see I'm gonna demonstrate on my left leg. All right. So you might recognize this stretch from our hip mobility series. All right, so to start, we're going to start with both toes pointed straight up towards the sky. Slight bend at the knee. I'm relaxing all the way back. Slight bend, and then remember, I'm just trying to pull the knee all the way up till it kisses the shoulder. And we're going to hang out here. So you want to maintain the stretch. It should feel uncomfortable, but it shouldn't feel painful. So there is a difference. Notice that the down leg is nice and straight. Both of my toes are pointed up to the sky. This will be important later. So you can really hang out here for a minute, 2 minutes. Sometimes I like to count by breaths. But just like before, you want to make sure that you're hanging out in the stretch long enough to actually see some progress. Okay, so don't shortchange the stretch. From there, you're going to release the leg, and then we are going to externally rotate from the hip. So it's not just my toe. From the hip socket, I'm actually turning out to externally rotate, and then I'm going to pull back. Notice that the range of motion, very, very different in this position. So I'm going to hang out here. 1 to 2 minutes, or for a number of breaths. You might notice that the leg starts to bounce a little bit or shake. That's normal. And then you always want to reset in between all the stretches. And then finally, we're going to internally rotate. So I'm turning the toe and hip in towards the midline of the body, so towards the center, and then same thing, pulling that leg straight back. So I'm stretching in 3 different positions. I'm starting straight, then I'm going external rotation, and then ending in internal rotation. Same thing, hold this position for about 1 to 2 minutes. Slowly release when you're done. From there, if you want, you can actually start over with the entire stretching series, go back from the center, then go external rotation to internal rotation. It's totally up to you. Now, finally, I'm going to talk about the 3rd and final step, which involves muscle activation and eccentric loading. So, this is very beneficial for people who are struggling with chronic tendonitis, chronic inflammation issues, or muscle strain. And the idea behind eccentric loading in this capacity is very similar to dry needling. So essentially, with eccentric loading, we're lengthening the muscle fibers under load, which causes more micro trauma than shortening the muscle fibers under load, which would be concentric muscle action. So with eccentric muscle action under load and under resistance, we actually get more micro trauma, which is known for greater strength gains and adaptations, but also it causes more damage. And that's actually the whole idea behind dry needling, is that you're going in and causing a micro amount of trauma to the body to flag to the body that, hey, there's something abnormal here and we need to actually spend a little bit more time to heal it. So it's flagging to the body that something is wrong, so it's going to promote more healing in that particular location. So the same is true with eccentric loading. So the best way to do this for the hamstrings is through RDLs or Romanian deadlifts. So you can actually use a resistance band for this. Now, I'm going to stand on it. I've got about equal band on both sides. And I want to make sure I can get a fair amount of resistance. So my back is flat, I'm hinging and pushing my hips back. Very slowly, by squeezing the hips, I'm gonna stand up nice and tall, getting into full hip extension. Then slowly, I'm gonna take about 10 counts to lower back down. So I've got a slight knee bend, soft through the knees. I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Bring it all the way back up. Same thing, lower it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm lengthening that tendon under load. Got some concentric actions coming back up. I'm spending more time focused on that eccentric loading pattern under load. So that's what's going to cause a lot of that micro trauma. And back up, we'll do one more. Down for 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then back up. Now, the position that I chose on the band allowed me to always maintain a little bit of resistance, so the band was never fully slack. So that's something that's definitely very important. For eccentric loading in this capacity, I would recommend using resistance bands as opposed to free weights, but free weights work as well. So those are my 3 steps for dealing with hamstrings. So step number 1 to review is soft tissue mobilization. So we're doing that with a lacrosse ball. So remember, since this applies more pinpoint pressure, we want to limit this to about every other day. Otherwise, you actually risk causing more inflammation and more damage than you want to. So soft tissue mobilization. Step 2, stretching. So showed you 3 different positions. We're starting in the center, then we go into external rotation at the hip, followed by internal rotation, stretching the hamstring muscle group in those 3 positions, and then finally ending up our series with activation and eccentric loading. Once again, I really like using the resistance band. Most people I talk to have some sort of bands at home. I know free weights are a little bit harder to come by. So those are your 3 steps for dealing with hamstring mobility. And if you guys have any other videos or any other topics that you would like me to cover, please let me know. Send me a message, send me a DM, reply in the comments below. Anything works, because I want to make sure that these videos are helpful to you. So thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you all again soon. Thanks.